Welcome in, fans, to another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. I'm Randon. Here with me, as always, is Dustin, and we have a very special guest here. We have Leroy SLC, one of the original followers of the podcast. Leroy, a fantastic fan, met you in person at the Clubbers Cookout, but so excited to have you on this show. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, guys. I'm happy to be here. I've been listening to it a while. Good show. Love it. I'm pleased to be talking to you guys. Dustin, Brandon, nice to both meet you on the screen.
We are excited to talk to you and get to know you more and let the fans get to know you more. That's what this Fanley Cup series is all about. So for those of you who don't know, you are very active on Twitter and you are well known in the community. But for those listeners who might not be on Twitter, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth season ticket holder. I'm up at the top of section 135 if you want to come say hi. I've met a lot of y'all at the Salty Ice Insider meetups down on the concourse. Actually, this month is my 30th anniversary of living in Utah. I'm from Southern California, Southeast Los Angeles County guy. I grew up a Kings fan. You know, hockey wasn't a big deal in LA in the 80s. I mean, I knew three players, maybe Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, and Bernie Nichols. And then, but the Kings hockey, it was just a minor sport until the day came where Wayne Gretzky came from the Oilers, and then all of a sudden it was the biggest, baddest thing in Los Angeles. Unlike the way hockey hit here, where all of a sudden it went from something that was kind of minor interest, even with the Kings, and then all of a sudden it was like the Raiders or the Lakers. It was just huge. So I would say really my genesis as a hockey fan probably dates back to 1989, 1990 when Gretzky came to town in LA. And I moved here in 95 to the great state of Utah, and I became a Jazz fan. Because one of the things about being a Kings fan is that, one of the things I loved about Utah when I first moved here is that everything was so accessible compared to Los Angeles. I would have wanted to go to the Kings games when I learned how to drive when I was 16, but there's no way my mom was going to let me drive into downtown Los Angeles. Are you crazy? Which is why there was a moment where I thought about becoming a Ducks fan, But so anyways, moving to Utah and just being able to get from one place to another easily, and then also just catching the fever of Jazz basketball and just getting a taste of the Utah community and how everybody just rallied around Jazz basketball. That's kind of like how my welcoming to Utah was just like, oh, wow, being in a Jazz basketball in 95, 96. So anyways, when Hockey Club came to town, I've always wanted to be on the ground floor. I've always been a casual hockey fan, but, the NBA can be so frustrating, and I kind of gave up being an NFL fan some time ago. A passionate baseball fan almost to a fault, but Hockey Club receives the majority of my entertainment dollars and my sports attention. So that's kind of how I ended up with the club. And if you've seen me at the games before, that's my older brother, Eric, that I'm going to most of the games with. And it's been a heck of a time ever since. I just love the team and I love this state.
Well, we are happy to have you in this state. And in the 90s, that would be a great time to come into the Utah Jazz fandom as they make those runs. That was also the time where I could have been a Jazz fan if Michael Jordan didn't rip our hearts out. And then it never stuck for me. So. Yeah. Otherwise, I might be a Jazz fan.
The day the Jazz went to the first finals, right? I think that was the 96 season, I think.
Yeah, I think 96, 97.
That was
on 96, 97, 97, 98.
Yeah, there you go. So that was my birthday. Might have been my 26th birthday, I think. And I remember watching that game on the night of my birthday. I walked out of my apartment downtown, and I was just walking downtown in downtown Salt Lake. And, Salt Lake was different 30 years ago, but still a lot the same. And I just remember walking around just thinking to myself, I just love this town. Like, this town is going places. Like, I can't wait. And at the time, I didn't think I was going to be here forever. Now I'm a Salt Lake lifer, but at the time I didn't think I was going to be here forever. But I just remember walking around and I'm just thinking, I just love this town, and the Jazz disappointed us a few times and we're still suffering, but But yeah, so it's been a great ride being here.
So the excitement surrounding that Jazz team, I think, is the closest equivalent to what you have about the excitement of the Utah Mammoth now after that first season. And we ask everybody who, especially for those of the fans who have been fans in different markets, and you've experienced Los Angeles and everything that comes to the Los Angeles market, the media frenzy, and just the sheer population size. From your experience in this first season, how does that hype level compare to what you've experienced in the past, whether it's the Los Angeles Kings or the Utah Jazz back in the 90s?
So Salt Lake just being a smaller market, smaller town, the hype is palpable, but it's more personal. And I don't know how to articulate that very well, but in a market like Los Angeles, there's so many hundreds of thousands of sports fans and so many different communities, and the stretch of the city itself is so large. It's, and maybe there's pockets of communities of Kings fans or, Dodgers fans or whatever, but it seems more here that the fan experience comes together in a more intimate way. Part of that might be just the nature of Utahns in itself, different type of people here in Utah. And I think if I'm going too far by saying I think Utah folks are a lot more sincere and a lot more supportive and community oriented. And so the thing I think that's really special here is that it has a real feeling here in the Utah market when it comes to the Mammoth of us, and especially I think the way that the club itself has handled its relationship with the fans and incorporated the fans to a great extent into the experience rather than like this behind the glass, us and them, we're not listening, we'll provide the entertainment product, and in some ways I think that it was being Utah Hockey Club and not being immediately branded had something to do with that. That's one of the things I love is, Clubbers, because that's a name that we all invented and an identity that we invented for ourselves out of necessity with nothing really else to go off of. And we've all embraced it and taken it, and the players got behind it to an extent. And so the exciting thing, I don't know if I'm answering your question, Brandon, but the exciting thing for me is I just feel like here in Utah, Salt Lakers, we're having more of a community impact on our identity and what's going to, how we're going to enjoy and how we're going to celebrate the club. Obviously, there's a lot of, dare I say, influencers. There's a lot of people, right, that are really stepping forward and getting ahead and putting themselves out there. Sojo Brandon, Broccoli Brandon, Jackie J. There's all sorts of people that are like really involving themselves. And I think that we're lucky to have the size market where individuals can still matter and bring the community together. Does that make sense? Did I get there?
I loved it.
I sort of love how you brought up community, because that's one of my biggest takeaways from this season is just seeing like all the different groups. Like there's the I forget what they call themselves, but the group of women that would meet up at a lot of the home games and take photos together, and then the hashtag Don't Hers, and then you said you two met at the meetup, and then like the letters to Ingy, all the community things that we saw this year. I wanted to ask, because you two met, I believe, for the first time in person at that meetup that Sojo put together. What was that like? Because I planned on going to it and then had some stuff come up which we don't need to get into. But what was that whole get together like? And who were some of the if you're willing to, your favorites that you got to meet at that meetup?
Well, I think there was some nervous anxiety as to how it was going to go off, whether or not it was going to be huge or small, or, how it was going to go. And it was a smash, I thought. It was big enough to feel like a community get together, but also small enough to where you could shake people's hands and slap them on the back and take selfies with them. What I loved about it is there's so many people who are willing to put themselves out there fearlessly. There's a lot of people who are shy. There's a lot of people who are wallflowers, especially they don't know where they fit into a community. And I just think there's just a lot of people at that get together the vibes were just off the chart, man. Props to Ryan Smith and Chris Armstrong for bringing just a ton of merch. Sojo B's event, Brandon's event, because it was essentially a fundraiser for Be the Hope. And you could just really feel the community vibe there. And like, the way I felt about it walking away is that, man, this is just the beginning. Like, we've got something really special. Like, we're really lucky because it can be bigger than just, oh, hey, we're sports fans, you know, and then at each other's throats. Like, we're really lucky if we hold on to this, that we can make it more than just about hockey. We can make it about community and hope, and we can make it about friendship. You know, I mean, there's a lot of different people that I've seen at the meetups on the concourse that I saw again at the cookout, but to be able to sit down and crush a few beers and eat potluck, like it's just a different venue, and I could just see that getting bigger and better and more people feeling inspired to, you know, take a lead and do something in the community. So it's a really good balance, I think, between hockey and sport, and also this is about us, you know. I mean, I love the state of Utah. I love it here. And that's kind of where I love hockey too. And I'm really serious about hockey. But one of the things that I love about this team the most is that I just love where I live. And I've always resented, especially in the last decade or so, people who are always from somewhere else, you know. They never really become where they're at. And, you know, that's what we get is like, sometimes you get what you get in life and you are where you are, and you either got to take it and, you know, be friends and be with the community that you've got, because there may not be a someday where you get another chance, you know. And so that's what I said, when the vibes are off the chart, I can just see that that's the direction this community is going. And I think it's just the beginning. And, we're pretty lucky, man.
The great thing about that cookout is it's the first annual cookout, right? And so we're going to have more and more and more. And I think it was such a great thing that, like you talked about, the community driven, that this was an organic thing that Sojo put together. This wasn't the Utah Hockey Club saying, hey, come to this thing. We're going to try to sell you season tickets, or we're going to try to sell you merch. They donated so much and it was a fundraiser for a great charity, but even more than that, just a way for the fans to get together, to get to know each other. You know, Dustin and I put on something like that. You know, there might be that lingering, oh, well, they're just trying to get their podcast some clout or something like that. But this was so organically driven by the fans, where everybody felt welcome, everybody felt included. And I'm hoping that the next year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, as long as Sojo is willing to put this on, that it just continues to grow and develop and to build those relationships between the fans themselves. That's what's going to be great about it.
Yeah, and you know, to add to that, I think the way we as a community interact, not just with the team, but with the league itself. I mean, look, part of the thing about being a Jazz fan, right, is that even when the team absolutely sucks, like, you're pretty close to selling the place out, and there's still, I mean, there's a lot of angry people, but we still have a loyal fan base, right? And I think the kernel of that is because, well, you know, Ryan Smith's saying Utah shows up, right? You know what I think that is? I think that is because part of Utah's identity is that we've been relegated to third place in everybody's consciousness. We don't really matter. We're not Philadelphia. We're not New York. We're not LA. We're always the last team on SportsCenter, but we matter, you know, and Utahns take a lot of crap, whether it's our political identities or religious identities or our histories or whatever, you know. And I think there's an underdog. Yeah, we're here and we're pretty cool, and we may know it and you don't, but rebellious might be too strong of a word, but we're sticking up for ourselves, you know. And I think that's part of where the passion comes in the sports aspect of the fan base. And I think that we're all, you know, with each other kind of bonded together, and that, hey, we're from here, we live here, you know. And so we want to show up for each other, and we want to let everybody know, I feel like we want to be the best fan base in the league. And that would be the greatest thing of all, to all these big cities and all these big teams with 50, 60, 70-year histories. Somehow, not only is Utah one of the better hockey teams, you know, maybe we go on a 10-year run of greatness, but also everybody wants to play in Utah because our fan base is the absolute best. And that starts with us, guys. Like, we have to build that. It's not going to get built for us. And if you ask anybody, you know, bless our Arizona brethren that are still with the team, but if you ask anybody who is a Coyotes fan, that was one of the problems with the team, is it was a fan base of everybody was always still from somewhere else, you know. Everyone was still a Kings fan, still a Red Wings fan, still a Canadiens fan, you know, that's one of the reasons why I get so buggy about people wearing, you know, opposing teams' jerseys, you know, in our house, man, because It's our house. It's Utah.
You know, as a season ticket holder, you get to see that play out. And I think it's going to take a few years for that to fully flesh out, where people aren't wearing their team. They're from Utah, right? But they're still Detroit was the worst, I feel like. Detroit and Colorado, but
the Detroit game was really bad. My across the hall neighbors are, we got a Penguins fan married to a Blackhawks fan. And they're hockey club fans, right? But my cross streams are, I got seats behind the bench. I'm wearing my Penguins jersey. I'm like, cool, great. Like, he's my neighbor. I'm not going to piss on him. But at the same time, I'm like, I really wish he wouldn't do that. But I kind of hear what you're saying. Once the novelty of, I can see my favorite team that that my dad liked or whatever, and I can see that team here in my barn. Once that novelty wears off, then I think we're going to win a lot of people over. But the one way to win people over, to make them forget all about the Blackhawks and the Penguins and the Red Wings and the Kings, and especially the frickin' Avalanche, is to win some Stanley Cups, right, guys? And to be a force year after year after year.
Yep, absolutely. Win on the ice, and that cures everything.
Sure does.
It's very hard for people, especially if they've been like lifelong fans of these teams, for them to just kind of like give up their allegiances.
It is.
But if you start bringing in some high name free agents and you start winning here in Utah, and the knock on wood, bring a cup home, I think it's going to be really easy for people to swear off those old allegiances.
Yep. I agree 100%. It's an exciting time to be a hockey fan, and the better we get, like, it's going to be difficult to deny that we're the main event.
So we've talked about like growing up in the community. Let's get into the actual hockey of it. One thing that I've loved to ask people as we've gone along is, do you have a favorite moment? As a season ticket holder, you experience a lot. Do you have a favorite moment from this season?
Yeah, we had a rough January with Dylan Guenther out. And when he came back from injury that first week of February and scored that last second goal to knock off the Flyers, I think that was the highlight of the season for me. Partly because the Flyers fans were such jerks, but yeah, that was epic. Coming back and knocking it off. I would say that's I know Veggie's big game against the Hurricanes. I know a lot of people say that that's the game. And that was a good one too. But that game, when Guenther came back from injury and won the game, it was like, we've got something special here. That was my favorite moment.
You know what makes that moment so great? I was thinking about this as I was watching the replay, and that goal, which was I don't want to say meaningless, right? Because it wasn't a meaningless regular season game, but it was in the doldrums of, kind of a slumping of a season and stuff. But the reaction to that goal, we might as well have just won a playoff game in overtime. Like, the hype was unreal. It was a great moment, and the fans really came out for it.
I've had a lot of moments in sports stadiums and arenas, some big ones, but I can count on one. That's one of the biggest pops of an audience, of a crowd that I've ever heard. You're right. It's as though we just made our way into the playoffs, even though we were just trying to crawl our way out of mediocrity and kind of a losing streak, Yeah, that was great. But you're right. That's exactly how it felt in the arena. It was like, we're gonna win the Stanley Cup, even though we're not.
We are eventually.
Well, little steps like that, moments like that, build a fan base. Moments like that build the momentum for players to come together when they overcome losing streaks. So you never know what a moment like that has an effect on your club.
Let's talk to keeping in the spirit of the Delta Center and the great moments that have been there as a season ticket holder. What has been your reaction to all things the product that the Delta Center has brought in this first season of the Utah Hockey Club? We've talked about the noise level as one of the louder arenas in the league, just the way it's designed and things. There's been some talk about whether the music has been appropriate or everything like that, but I think it's undeniable that the production value got so much better from game 1 to game 82, and they are just doing what they need to do to put the best product on the ice. As a season ticket holder, what were your thoughts for this first season?
Well, obviously we had to scramble to be ready, and it was almost a basketball management organization scrambling to put together a hockey entertainment product. And some of that bled over into the hockey season. And, obviously, it seems like at least 3 different people have mentioned it on your show, but Sound of Silence, nobody wants to hear that again. I think it was the first couple games we didn't have the power play clock on the screen. That was something that was like, hey guys, and then it appeared, that's all stuff that's pretty easy to forgive. And in fact, in some ways, if you kind of knew what we had to pull off to make it all happen, not only is it forgivable, but it's kind of charming. And also those are some of the seminal stories of clubber history. Those are some of the little quirks that we all kind of experienced of like, oh, this is what hockey's kind of new in Utah. And then, eventually, didn't we have snow that dropped from the rafters and that only lasted like a week or so, and then they must have ran out of snow or the snow machines broke or something? It was supposed to be a big hype, and then so there was some shortcomings. Maybe we can find a different, we just got hit up for a penalty, then Weezer say it ain't so, But hey, that's all the fun stuff, and we're getting better at it. And the music did get better, and the entertainment product was much better as time went on. Props to the Jazz Bear. Props to, we got better with the in-game or in-between, break entertainment. But I got to tell you, once again, getting back to the community, if it's not for people showing up in disco jackets, if it's not for people showing up in funny vegetable hats, if it's not for all the little, the dudes with the mammoth heads on, like if it's not for, and that's what great hockey fan bases are all about. It's not spoon-fed by the organization. It comes from the community. It comes from the fans. And that's, I think, where the, SCG got it right, is that they saw that, some of the more successful, the most successful entertainment aspects of what we've got going on are coming from the people who are immersed in the product. And I think they did a pretty good listening job to that. I can't wait to see what we do, because really, guys, we're coming up on our first, that was the dress rehearsal. Yeah, it was a real season, but I mean, this is our first real organized crack at it coming up here. We've got a whole cycle. Jerseys are going to be out on time. We've got a logo. We've got everything set up. We knew what didn't work, what did work from last season, what everybody complained about. I think it's going to be huge, especially now they know what to invest in. Now that we have an identity, they know whether or not to invest in a 75-foot D laser show of a mammoth walking across the ice or whatever they cook up with, or whether to keep the snow machines or let them go, So I think now that they have something to go on and they've had enough time to brainchild it, I think we're just starting to cook.
Speaking of like in-game and Mammoth and everything that they can do at the games, this might be putting you a bit on the spot. Do you have an idea of what you want the goal song to be, or should they stay with what they have now that just sort of ties directly into the Let's Go Utah chant?
Okay, I'll tell you, and most people don't know this song, but there's an old punk band called Sham 69, and there's a song called The Kids Are United. And seeing especially the youth movement we have going on with this team. Sham 69, Kids Are United, I think that'd be a good one. Willy Bully, that might be fun, although it doesn't really quite hit celebrationally as hard. Celebrationally, is that a word? It doesn't hit quite as hard, so I think we need something kind of punkier and stronger. So yeah, that's my vote. Look it up. 69, Kids Are United.
I've
all
got
right,
it
Brandon,
already
you
Googled.
ask a question, I'm going to look it up right now, and I'll give it a listen.
I think Brandon's got it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. Let's see if I can play it on the air here. Let's take a look here. All right, here we go. The Kids Are United.
Today, love has been given to grab and enjoy. So let's all grab and let's all enjoy. If the kids are united, then we'll never be divided. If the kids are united, then we'll never be divided. Just take a look around you.
I could get behind that. I could get behind that.
I can dig that. I can dig that for a goal song.
That one.
Well, you'll
is
get
good.
17,000 fans. What the kids are united.
There's always that. Every team has that, right? Like, and everybody talks about, like, St. Louis had Gloria, Colorado has whatever song they have, that Blink-182 song or whatever. So we need something like that, and that had the tempo, the speed. It wasn't overbearing. It wasn't slow. That was good pacing, and I think that's what makes a good goal song.
It's a little Premier League English soccer, maybe. I don't know if it's too soccery, football-y for hockey, but I think it's great. And I can hear all the people singing along with it.
We could just ride the coattails of Ted Lasso. It's a very popular show, probably especially here in Utah. We can just ride the coattails right off that.
Hey, believe, baby.
You know what you need for a good goal song is good goal scorers. So we're going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests. Who is your favorite player on this Utah Mammoths team, and why is it Nick Schmaltz?
It changes game to game. I got to tell you, I'm not good with favorites. You ask me what my favorite food or my favorite color is, and I'm just going to fail. But I'm going to give you my wife's favorite, which would be Dylan Gunther. You ask me off the top of my head, I'll tell you Jack McBain. But, I think I'm going to give you my wife's favorite, which is Dylan Gunther. I don't know. Haven't heard a lot of people say Clayton Keller. I mean, Captain America, come on. Maybe that's going to change here pretty soon. Now that we've got an IIHF gold with him as the captain, we're going to maybe reconsider his versatility and whether or not he's capable of being on that American team in the Olympics where he ought to be. But why not Clayton Keller? In fact, that's going to be my answer. I'm going to say Clayton Keller. How about that?
That is a great answer. Well, it's tough to compete with Nick Schmaltz, though. I mean, when you got such a great player as Nick Schmaltz on the ice, everybody else, it's easy to forget him.
Are people distancing themselves proactively from Nick Schmaltz because they anticipate he's not going to be on the team in 2 years? I mean, we're not going to re-sign Schmaltz, right?
So I think we should, but I guess it depends on the contract. But here's what I'll tell you what happened. So the Arizona Coyotes, their media market really sold the idea that that Nick Schmaltz is a very tradable asset and he's easy to move on. I say we brought him from Chicago, and so he's not a homegrown player, right? Like the entire identity of the Arizona Coyotes under the GM Bill Armstrong era was draft and develop. These are your assets, and if you didn't get the guy through the draft, he's expendable. And I feel like that kind of bled over into the Utah Hockey Club, and that's why I think Nick Schmaltz gets so much hate, because he was so expendable in the Arizona market. And then I forget who, Petey's Puck Talk, you remember him? He kind of was very critical during Nick Schmaltz's slump in the season through the November era when he went on like the 16-game score drought, and talking about how he was the highest paid player and he wasn't producing kind of thing. So Nick Schmaltz, I feel like I've become his greatest defender because I feel like he's unfairly gotten a lot of hate, where I feel like he's a very integral part of the team, but he may not be there next year.
Well, he turned it on a bit second half of the season, and I think he scored 20 goals. Didn't he get to 20? With the start
Yes, he
that
did.
he had to get to 20 goals, that means he turned it on, But yeah, I think with the youth movement, like we had mentioned, and, a few other circumstances, I have a feeling that he's not going to be with the team. Although there's a lot of people who are still big Nick Schmaltz fans. I don't know if you guys ever watched The Hockey Guy on YouTube. He's a big Nick Schmaltz fan,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind Schmaltzy. But listen, there was a whole thing, too, about his personality.
He doesn't smile. Remember on the mini mic, he doesn't smile.
No, he's not a heartthrob, and he's not a big personality guy, he's just gets to work, and when that's not going, there's a lot of people like, so we'll see what happens with Schmaltzy. Not a bad player, though.
Nick Schmaltz is like he's a perfect example of when I'm talking about players, how I'll oftentimes say that you can't just look at box scores, you can't just look at stats, because he's the type of guy where a puck can be coming towards him and he will intentionally whiff on that puck to allow it to go to a teammate, to allow that teammate to score. And that doesn't show up on box scores. That doesn't show up on stat sheets. The old whiff assist, that's one of Randon's favorite moves. So that's something that you have to take into account when you think about Nick Schmaltz, is just the game IQ of him to know when to whiff on shots and fan them by, and he cashes in on that, what is it, the Harbor Breeze contract that he has that Randon loves to talk about. But
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I think to get into what you're saying is, I think there's some players who make the players on the ice around them better. Whether or not
Yes.
you see that in the statistical column or not, or in the plus minus or in their assists or their points or whatever, I know that the lines moved around a lot, but how many lines did Barrett Hayton play with Nick Schmaltz? Right? I mean, Barrett Hayton had 20 goals this season. I mean, he's getting better all the time. But so that being said, yeah, I think that's something to add to it too, just to back up what you're saying, Randon, is that it doesn't always equate to statistics. There's a on-ice presence.
Now, talking about Nick Schmaltz and whether he's going to be on the team next year, he could be moved. He could be used to move and bring in a piece. Do you have any target free agents or trade pieces that you would like to see GMBA go after in this offseason?
Well, now I'm not an advocate for Mitch Marner. So, and I know that you guys are, right? Yeah. I'm more the Brock Besser, Nikolai Ehlers, let's get a few guys. I thought I saw that Marco Rossi is getting shopped. So I think although I think Marco Rossi is a little small for us. I mean, there's all this talk about why we might not draft Hagens because he's too small. And then, well, do you get a 5'9" Marco Rossi in the whole situation too? But shopping him, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the business of GMBA. I will say this, and it's one of the things that I know that Marner's a great player. Not that this is going to turn into a Marner conversation, but let me make my point. Is that you mentioned I mentioned players that make other players better on the ice, even if it doesn't show up in the stats. And chemistry has so much to do with hockey. And I'm one of my season ticket buddies that I'm on the same row with, Dustin. Shout out to Dustin. He, is very against the Mitch Marner idea because you bring Marner in the locker room, he overshines maybe some way his presence is overbearing and disrupts some kind of chemistry. I won't go so far to say Marner's a cancer in the locker room because I just think that the toxic market of Toronto will do that to anybody. It's a toxic market, so everybody becomes a cancer. You get him out of that, and he might be something different. And I'm not a Marner hater, but, for the money, I'm more along the lines of, hey, listen, we've got this far. We almost made it to the playoffs with what we've got. And the other thing about it, too, is I'd be really careful about how we sign free agents, and I'm sure GMBA is thinking about this. You've got Daniel Boot coming in. Tija Ginla missed his first development season, but eventually he's going to have a place somewhere on this team. I don't know if Cole Baudouin is, going to be trade bait, or if he ends up, he seems like a great third line, fourth line guy, even as a youngster, energy line, check line kind of guy, just wearing other teams down. Like, we've got to have enough spots for the young players to grow and develop chemistry with one another. And I know that it's like we're trust fund babies and we've inherited this huge sum of money and we're just got a hole in our pocket to come out and buy the greatest new accessory for our machine. But at the same time, I think the process of us being patient and finding out, all this talk we had over the offseason about Tage Thompson. Oh, can we get Tage Thompson? Well, Daniel Boot might be the next Tage Thompson if we're just patient. There were comparisons to him in the 23 draft about, he's got the same skill set as Tage Thompson. All this hype that we heard about Ivan Demidov with the Canadians and all this big splash of his rookie debut. Dmitry Simashev, he could be a big splash like Demidov is. And if we're patient and find out what we've got, we almost made the playoffs anyways. So I think that's one of my cautions if I were general manager Bill Armstrong, is the fan base wants to, make Ryan Smith prove that he's really out to spend the money and that, that we're going to be able to buy ourselves a machine that's going to work. And I think if we just trust the process and are conservative and get role players, because remember, it's not just the first six, it's not the top six that wins games all the time. It's the third and fourth line guys, and you're really seeing that in the Stanley Cup playoffs. You see that with a team like Florida, where those third and fourth liners are just grinding. There's no break. They are just grinding guys down. And so anyway, so I'm not sure with the free agent market who the best signing is, but I'm more of a youth movement. Let's get the role players we need. Let's get the depth that we need. And let's get people who are going to fit the system rather than getting the star player that's, well, as Armstrong says, let's not win the summer. Let's win the winter. So that's kind of my take on the free agent situation.
Oh, and you mentioned talking about it, bringing people in. The big news today, at least when we're recording this episode, not when the episode is published, but like you said, we just signed to their entry-level contracts, Daniil Boot and Dmitry Simashev, who are what we're talking about signing 5'9" guys. These two are monsters. Simashev is what, 6'4", 6'5", and Daniil Boot is 6'6", so he will be the tallest forward that we have on the team. So that size, talking about size matters, that is something that this team has desperately lacked. But two guys who were both drafted in the 2023 draft, both in the first round, both just won the KHL Cup, the Gagarin Cup in May 21st. Two guys that are going to be homegrown, and I think you and I both agree, play big roles in this team's development and eventually their run through the playoffs in a couple of years.
Yep. Yep. And, back to free agency, we can make a big splash on retreads of other people's great players who are already at their peak, or we can lay off the gas a little bit and find out. We got to extend Cooley. Don't you think Clayton Keller needs a raise? Or we're going to get players coming in. The chain reaction of signing a player for 11 or 12 million, and you're paying your captain 7 million, and you're going to pay Gunther 8 million, and Cooley, how much are we going to have to sign him for? So it's all financial chemistry that has to work too. So that being said, then if you got to look at the future of the team, and I know the cap is going up, but if you look at the future of the team, you've got players like, if you've got Simashev and he hits the way that we're all hoping that he does, and Daniil Boot, if he hits the way, we've got a lot of money. We've got our money already spent. Maybe not this season, but down the road, we're going to want to pay these players. And if we lock up some huge free agent in a straitjacket contract, who's got to get his ice time and is going to block other players, but also throw off the general equilibrium of how we spend our money, because that's a political process as well. There's a danger in that.
No, absolutely. And I think you're looking at, there's just not a lot of 100-point scores that hit free agency. And I think that's what makes the hype around Mitch Marner so much, is that it just doesn't happen very often. Yeah. But you look at next year's, not only their draft class is significantly better than this year's draft class, but the free agency for those who make it that far. Next year's free agent market has some really, really big names. So while I really, do like Mitch Marner and his long-term success, there is a very big, what's the word I'm looking for, case to be made of not spending. Even though you've got cap money now, there's a case to be made that you don't need to spend it this year, because next year there's a lot of people that you can go after, whether it's trading for them and then signing them long term or what have you. There's a lot of big name free agents next year, along with a much stronger draft class. So definitely some options for GM.
It might be out of our hands anyways, because the buzz as of time of this recording is that Marner might want to sign some place that doesn't have an income tax. Looking at you, Vegas, that's a lot of extra money in your pocket if you're looking for a big paycheck. So we might not even get a shot at him. He might want to play in a big market. He might not even be sold on us, but I guess we're going to find out.
Utah legislators, come on, get rid of our state taxes. We don't want them anymore. Yeah. And I don't want property taxes either.
Yeah, why?
Or sales tax.
Yeah, no more income tax for any of us. How about that?
Come on, not just for the athletes. Think of the little guys. Think of the little guys here.
Yeah, we'll spend a lot more money on hockey and maybe even basketball if we don't have to pay income tax. So we'll see.
Hey, could be. We struggle. That's the one thing I think that is the big narrative.
Get behind this, Ryan Smith.
Right? You're a billionaire. You've got these guys in your pocket. Get them to play ball.
That's what I hear. Ryan Smith is running everything.
He's like a puppeteer.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of puppeteers, Master of Puppets, one of my favorite heavy metal bands, Metallica, a big influence musically of mine. You, my friend, are a musician. You're a musician. You've talked about being a punk rocker. For those of you who did not see it, we've got Leroy, who created one of the better not just fan-made, but one of the better songs for all the crap of whether it's AI songs that the Utah Hockey Club have used. You created a heavy metal masterpiece that you released on Twitter that I encourage everyone to go see. Get it. The music is a very big influence on you as a person. Why don't you talk a little bit about the music that you've made?
Part-time musician. I've been see, in one incarnation or another in a band for most of the time I've lived in Utah, probably 25 years. Punk band, blues band, metal band. Was in a band called Blues 66, still am, that's been playing around Salt Lake for quite some time. Not hugely popular, but we did play South by Southwest, several years ago. So yeah, I mean, I dabble in music, and it's a joy of mine and a hobby, and I like making little fan jingles, yeah. So and also being a child of the 80s and having hair metal coursing through my veins, felt inspired to go ahead and create We Are the Mammoth, which was my heavy metal ode. In some ways inspired by the idea of like, oh gosh, we need a goal song is what we need. And so that was my best take at arena rock goal song.
Well, with your permission, we'll play it at the end of the episode. We'll toss it into post-production if you're okay with that. And everyone,
sure.
If you have not heard it, so We Are the Mammoth. You can go check out at Leroy SLC's Twitter to watch that, because it was phenomenal coming off the backs of that. Even though now I find myself singing at the April 18th, 2024. I find myself walking around the house singing it. So maybe that dude was onto something.
Maybe. Are you going to go? Is Metallica going to come to town? They've got a tour coming up. I imagine you've probably seen them before, Brandon, or no?
You know what? To be 100% honest, I do not attend a lot of concerts. So I have not actually seen Metallica live. True story. The only bands I've seen live are Styx, Gia, and REO Speedwagon, and I've seen them each 3 times.
Was that at the Wendover show?
No, they came to the Delta Center. Styx came to the State Fairgrounds, and then I did go to to Wendover for one of them. But my very, very first concert was Styx, Journey, REO. It was Styx had just released their Cyclorama album, which was, it was okay. It wasn't as good as their greats, but they were still trying to do it. And of course, I never got to see Steve Perry live.
Okay,
but
that's what my question was going to be. Did
never
you
got to see Steve
Perry Journey, or
Nope.
Who's the Korean kid?
Yeah, it was the Korean singer that I can't remember his name, but I felt like it was still a great show. I will say REO put on the best show between the 3 of them. In terms of the concert environment and the interacting with the crowd, REO was phenomenal.
Love REO Speedwagon. That reminds me of being 11 years old.
I was 15 when they came to the Delta Center. So you and I, kindred spirits.
Yeah.
You two are just sitting here naming all these classic rock bands, like well-known bands, and in my head, I'm trying to remember the last handful of concerts that I went to, and thinking back, I believe it's a band called Tupperware Remix Party, a band called Ninja Sex Party, a band called the Young Dubliners, they're very good, and Garth Brooks.
Nice. So
I did Garth Brooks when he came to Rice Eccles. That's like the one well-known band that I've been to recently.
Are these like EDM acts, or what is the genre here, Dustin? For some of these bands, I don't recognize them.
Tupperware Remix Party they're like Daft Punk.
Okay.
So and they're pretty good. Like they have a funny name, and some of their songs are funny, but they're very good. Ninja Sex Party is a comedy band. They have songs like House, like Ninja Samurai Abstinence Patrol, and Robot Laser Shark, and just like a lot of crazy. Lightning and Thunder, which is a song about a man who is struck by lightning in the junk and he turns into a superhero, and he derives his superpowers from his testicles that turn into lightning and thunder. So that's a comedy one. You said you're familiar with the Young Dubliners. They're like an Irish rock band.
Yeah, very eclectic mix of musical influences, Dustin.
Yes, my music fandom spans a very wide range.
You gave me an idea. I think what I'm going to do, based on this conversation, is I'm going to create some kind of Euro dance song dedicated to the new Russians that just signed today. Sergachev obviously is going to be a bit. Simishev and Boot, I'll make it like, I don't know, Mammoth in Russian or something. So we'll see how that goes.
Dude,
okay.
Russian
and we
music
could
goes hard.
a potential goal song by Twerp or Tupperware Remix Party. They have a song that they actually perform with Ninja Sex Party as like a collaboration called the No Pants Dance. So we can just
that sounds like a
Yes.
wild time in the Delta Center. Drop your pants.
Things are gonna get spicy. We may have to have you. We'll have to hire you to make a two-line pass theme song and get your influence there.
I'd
So
love
Yes.
to. I'd love to. You
Yeah,
tell me the genre and the general theme of what you want, and I'll do my best.
well,
Gentlemen.
you're cooking up some other things talking about punk rock. So you have a baseball podcast, and then you are also going to join the Utah Hockey Club podcast sphere. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the baseball and what you're cooking up?
So, along the baseball lines, I am a co-host of a baseball history podcast called The Baseball Book Club. Spotify, Apple, all the different platforms. Check it up. If you search it, it'll come up pretty simple. My podcasting partner, John Cheslek, and I were surprised that no one had really latched onto that idea, but we read all the baseball classics of literature and nonfiction, so you don't have to review and discuss. We also have authors on. We're in the middle of production for season 3. We're going to have best-selling author Joe Posnanski, who authored the Baseball 100 on the show. That's kind of one of the texts that we cover in our show. So if you're a baseball guy, check that out. And also, I would imagine by the time this pod is airing, my Utah Hockey Club, sorry, I did it again, Utah Mammoth themed podcast with Mammoth John. I'm in the 801. Mammoth John and I are going to have a podcast. Probably would be released somewhere about the same time you're hearing this pod now. So look out for it. But, one thing that we were talking about, Randon, just before Dustin joined us, is one thing that I think we're both really impressed with is how cooperative and collaborative and non-competitive all the different podcast voices from our community have been. Because that's part, we were talking earlier about, you were asking me about the experience of being an LA sports fan or that, of hockey. And then what's it compared to remember when I was a hockey fan in Los Angeles, the bulk of it was done before the time that everybody had a podcast. It was kind of done, pre-internet, Riverside, all the tools to have a podcast, it just wasn't as simple. And now I think we're in a lucky time in being a sports fan's history where we all can have a voice. We're not just waiting for that one show that we listen to on our drive home and hopefully we get the information we need, or the one article in the paper, but whether it's Substack or Reddit or various podcasts on various social media platforms, we can all jump in and have a voice and collaborate together. And that's something that I kind of think holds the community as well. Which is all of us kind of making a say, and especially that most of it has been done in a cooperative, collaborative way. So I think we kind of want to join the conversation and really looking forward to that. And of course, any cross-pollination or collaboration that you gentlemen want to do, we are all about it, because I think that you guys have the right tempo of the fan base as well, which is, we're just trying to pull the community together. We're just trying to be fans together. We're just trying to represent this community, and we're just trying to make hockey in Utah the best community experience that we possibly can. Because, we live here, and this is what we're representing, baby. Utah shows up, like we said. Well, that in some ways, this is all of our way of doing it. What do you think about that?
No, absolutely. We will definitely get in the studio with you and have you in with us. And for those of you who don't have a podcast, or if you're thinking of starting one, it's just fun, right? It's just fun to do. It's fun talking. Dustin and I and Ryan have a group chat and stuff. And we talk sometimes about the stresses of life and all we all have families and everything like that. We all have real world responsibilities. But there's a time when you're just sitting here talking to friends, talking about hockey, things you love. It's just really fun to do. Whether people listen or care doesn't really matter, because it's just fun to do.
Well, how often do you sit an hour aside, uninterrupted, committed to know I'm going to get my phone, I'm going to check this ding that came on or whatever, just to sit and talk like we did for the last 60 minutes about hockey, right? There's so many distractions in the modern world. So you're right, guys, is that even if you're not cranking it out in the follows and the listens, and you're not nationally syndicated, or you're not, Spittin' Chicklets or Pat McAfee show or whatever, even if you're not achieving mainstream success, that's not the point. You know, and we've mentioned the word punk rock over and over, and I don't know if it's equating what we're getting at, is that it's about a community. One of the things that I've always thought about music is music started as a bunch of wild humans around a campfire telling stories and getting into the groove because it felt good, because it brought communities together. Not because it sold gold records or platinum records, or not because there was going to be a world tour or a gig or a bunch of money to be made out of it. It wasn't that. Is that the genesis of music was community and people coming together. And in some ways, podcasting, in some ways, is the 21st century version of that. Is that we all get a voice and we all get to listen to each other, and we don't get gatekeeped, and you can take it or leave it, and it can build communities or it can divide communities, but one way or another, it's kind of like sitting around a campfire here in some ways with you guys for 60 minutes, uninterruptedly getting into the groove of what we all collectively love together, which is the sport of hockey and our hockey club and our community.
Absolutely. I will say this. I will say one thing before we get to rapid fire. Now that you've joined, you are contractually obligated to join the July 12th 3-on-3 street hockey tournament, and we have to meet on the ice. And by ice, I mean street. Yeah, you have to. It's in the contract.
Can I be the goalie?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
We actually don't know if if you play with goalies or how this works. We just kind of we threw together a team and said, when we registered and said, all right, we're gonna play. We don't know what's going on.
Well, Dustin, I haven't met you in person physically, but Randon, I've met you, and you know that I'm kind of a big lad. I can take up a lot of space. So, you know, maybe I can be the wall of the Wasatch if there's any such a thing. Not too fleet-footed or quickly on my feet, but I'll check a sucker, I'll put a sucker down if I have to, but I don't think it's that kind of sport, right?
There's a lot of talk that if there's a no contact rule, that everybody's going to mutually agree that maybe we just ignore that rule. So we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping it should just be a fun time.
When
it's going to be blazing hot.
Come together.
Yeah,
we'll set our own rules.
All right. Yeah, I feel if I'm not a goalie, I'm kind of a greasy goal, block the goalie's view from whoever's doing the thing. So I can take a lot of space up into the crease. So maybe that'll be a spot for me. We'll figure it out. But yeah, whatever you guys want to draft me to do, I'll do it.
Yes. Perfect. Well, this is great. It's going to be a lot of fun for those of you who don't know the July 12th 3-on-3 street hockey tournament for the Utah Mammoth. It's going to be at Southtown Mall, times and everything to be determined. More info on that. But Leroy, are you ready for probably the most important segment we've ever produced on this show?
I'm ready. I am prepared. I'm ready to go here. You let her rip.
Hey, Dustin, why don't you introduce
I feel
what
like
got?
You've been listening to the podcast. You've probably heard this a time or two, so I don't need to give the spiel of what it is. You probably already know what the questions are, so we'll just jump right into it.
Everything but the last question. Yeah.
True.
Okay.
Very true.
Okay.
So, top of their game, burger or pizza?
Burger.
All things considered, University of Utah or BYU?
Utah.
Big spoon or little spoon?
Big spoon.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Do mermaids have live babies or do they lay eggs?
They have live babies. They're mammals.
Are they
Mermaids
mammals?
They have breasts.
Would mermaids be mammals?
They have
milking. Milking.
Yeah,
Yep. That's
mermaids have breasts, so they've got to have live babies because they got to nurse them.
I can't argue the logic.
Yeah.
This is why we bring Leroy on the cast. For that, who else has that insight into mermaid biology? Nobody. You're not going to find that anywhere else.
Yeah, well, I spend a lot of time thinking about mermaids, guys.
I kind of do too. I think we all, Ariel, we all do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're gonna get into the podcast after dark thing, which we should make maybe make a real thing. But no, that's it's what's been so great is watching the evolution of that fifth question and how much more comfortable people have been getting with it. We had the first few guests who, Brandon kind of handled the curveball a little bit, and then we had Citation answering it. But man, now the last few guests, you guys have been on it answering that fifth question.
I feel like I got lucky. I got a good last question.
You can tell the ones who came on because they've been listening to the podcast and they listened, so they knew what to expect, and the ones who were just like, yeah, I'll go on a podcast. I don't really listen to you guys, but I'll come on your podcast because we've been 3, 4, 5 weeks into this, and people are like, I wasn't expecting that. Like, you don't listen to the podcast. How we did have a guest on before you. I'm not going to name names, but we did the interview, and then we went to go find them on Twitter. They didn't even follow the show on Twitter.
Really?
Not even on Twitter.
It was a shame.
Wow.
But I think that did get remedied. I think
They
it did
have
get
corrected
fixed.
it.
Great show, guys. Great production value. You've got great guests.
Production is all Randon. I just show up, I talk, and I hang up and go away.
Well, great chemistry, too. I mean, you guys just keep rocking it, keep cranking them out. I mean, because I love the show.
Well, thank you, Leroy, and it's been great having you. Before we let you go, though, if you want to drop your socials or where the guests can find your podcast, or just any closing thoughts you've got about the Utah Mammoth.
I am Leroy at Leroy SLC on Twitter. If you want to hear me go on and on and on about baseball history, which is not for everybody, but I'll do it. That's at The Baseball Book Club on all of your streaming platforms. Check it out. And Tusked Up. I think we're going to have a great second season. We're going to make the playoffs, guys. We're going to keep building this thing. And as a fan base and as a community, it's just going to get better and better. Show up for your podcasts, listeners. Show up for your events. When people put things on, when people put themselves out there and organize things, support those people. Support your local community, because this is how we build this thing, and we become the best fan base in the NHL. So
100%.
Yeah, that's my parting shot.
Hey, we really appreciate your time today, Leroy. Everybody, my friend and yours, a great fan, a great human being, Leroy on the show. And now, everybody, for your listening pleasure, this is We Are the Mammoth by Leroy. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Check us out, twolinepass.com. And everybody, have a great night.
We are